What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to show you 10 of the biggest mistakes new drone pilots make with the DJI Mini 5 Pro when they're starting out, including some tips that could literally save your drone. I've been flying drones for over 7 years, and I've made a lot of mistakes in the process, from settings I didn't know that made me crash, to pushing the limits too far and nearly losing my drone. So hopefully this video will save you from making those mistakes and destroying your drone in the process. So diving right in, mistake number 1 is improperly hand launching your drone and crashing on takeoff. So to hand launch a drone, you just hold it in one hand and with the other hand pull the sticks downward and to the center of the remote, and that will start your motors, and then you can just increase the throttle and the drone will take off and fly. But what can sometimes happen, and this often happens to beginners, is you start the props and you give it, you think enough throttle for it to take off, and then, oh, there we go, it went all the way down into the ground. This was supposed to catch it, it did not work. But our drone is fine. But if you're doing that up at full height standing up, it can go down, crash into the ground, hit rocks or something, and potentially damage the drone. But instead, you want to make sure after you've started the props that you give it enough throttle that it's kind of tugging at your hand, wanting to go up, and then you can safely release it. And why did it fly over there? I don't know. There's a bunch of wind, so that probably had something to do with it. But you want to make sure that it has enough lift to stay in the air and go up once you release it. And then to catch it, just hold down on your stick here until it finally decides to come down. Grab it out of there. There you go, hand launched and caught your drone. And the other way you can easily crash when you are hand launching your drone, or even when you're just taking off from the ground, is running into overhead obstacles. It's easy to underestimate how far up the drone will go when you take off and not pay attention to what might be up there above the drone, and it runs into it and crashes. I actually had this happen while I was testing out the Mini 5 Pro. I was hand launching it on a boardwalk and wasn't paying attention to the fact that there were some branches just a couple feet above the drone. It went up, the propeller clipped a twig, that made the motor shut off, and it fell down over the railing. Had to do a little recovery mission. So always pay attention to what's above your drone and make sure it has enough throttle to take off. And mistake number 2 is trusting obstacle avoidance too much. Now, the Mini 5 Pro has a really great obstacle avoidance system, and obstacle avoidance is great when it works. It will save you from running into things a lot of the time, but it's not bulletproof. I've already had my Mini 5 Pro crash 3 times with obstacle avoidance on, and a lot of beginners don't realize that you can still crash with obstacle avoidance turned on. Obstacle avoidance works best with big things like, for example, a wall, the side of a building, a tree with leaves on it, a car, something like that. But it really struggles with things like thin branches, wires, anything really small. The obstacle avoidance cameras just can't really see it, and you will run into it. So even with obstacle avoidance turned on, you still need to pay attention to what's around the drone. I actually trust obstacle avoidance a lot more in summer when there's leaves on the trees versus in winter when there's no leaves on the trees and there's a lot of little bare twigs that the drone can't see and can crash into, leading to all 3 of my Mini 5 Pro crashes. And mistake number 3 is not backing up the footage off of the SD card or internal storage of the drone so that you don't lose the footage if you crash. This is something a lot of beginners don't even think about, but it can save you from losing a lot of great footage. This actually happened to a friend of mine. They had their drone out over a river, something went wrong with the drone, crashed into the river, no way to recover it, and DJI actually replaced the drone, but they lost months of footage because they hadn't backed up the footage off the SD card onto their computer or onto some kind of a hard drive. I've also lost footage off of an FPV drone when I accidentally crashed it into the pool at the bottom of a waterfall and wasn't able to recover it. Again, I had DJI Care on that drone, DJI replaced the drone, but the footage was gone forever. So always download the footage off of your SD card to your computer after a day of flying. That way, if you lose your drone, you'll still have all of your photos and videos up to that point. If I'm shooting something really important and I absolutely can't afford to lose any of the footage, I'll sometimes even swap out the SD card out of the drone between flights so that if I crash on a certain flight and can't get the drone back, I won't have lost the footage from the flight before. So just keep your SD cards backed up. And if you'd like to learn how to get the most cinematic shots with your Mini 5 Pro, there's a couple things that that you won't want to miss. First of all, I've put all of my best cinematic settings for the Mini 5 Pro into a PDF checklist, and you can download that completely for free. Link to download it is in the description. And second, I've made a completely free 45-minute drone filmmaking training where I share my top 10 secrets to getting cinematic drone shots with whatever drone you have, including the Mini 5 Pro, covering the best settings to use, how to compose your shots, how to get smooth dynamic movements, how to edit your videos, how to color grade them, and a whole bunch more. And link to that is down in the description as well. Again, completely free. Now back to the drone mistakes. Mistake number 4 is crashing when flying the drone backwards or sideways. Now, this might seem obvious, but you can't see what's behind your drone when you're flying backwards, and the same thing flying to the side. And so a lot of crashes happen when you're flying backwards or sideways. Now you can actually get some of the best shots by flying backwards or sideways, but you have to make sure that you think about what might be behind the drone or beside it before you do that. Now, obstacle avoidance definitely helps with this, but as I mentioned earlier, sometimes even with obstacle avoidance turned on, you can still run into things. Now on the Mini 5 Pro, there's a feature that can really help with this called Vision Assist, which basically lets you see out of the obstacle avoidance cameras to the side and to the back, and also above and below the drone. And you can use that to look behind the drone as you're flying and filming something backing up while the camera is pointed forward filming. So just always pay attention to what's around your drone on all sides when you're flying. Drone mistake number 4 is losing orientation and not being able to figure out where your drone is when you're flying a ways away. It can be really easy to lose your bearings and not know which way the drone is pointed, especially with a drone that's as small as the Mini 5 Pro. Now, if this happens to you, there are several things that you can do. First of all, you can pull up the map. You'll find this down in the bottom left corner of the screen, and if it's not showing the map, you can just swipe a few times left or right until it brings up the map. And then you can just look at the map and it will show the home point, where you took off or where your controller is, where the drone is, what direction it's pointing, and you can see exactly which direction you need to fly to bring the drone back home to you. Now on the Mini 5 Pro, there's something really handy called AR home point. This will basically superimpose a little home point icon on the camera feed, so you can just spin the drone around, look for that AR home point, and know which way to fly the drone home at any point. Of course, you can also just hit the return to home button and the drone will fly back all on its own, but it's good to also know how to get it back manually. Now, if none of these things I just mentioned works and you have line of sight to your drone, which you're supposed to, there's a handy little trick that you can use to tell which way it's pointed relative to you. Just simply start flying forward and look at the drone and see if it moves right or left, and then you can just turn in the direction that it's flying. So if it's flying to the right, you'll want to turn to the right until it's no longer flying to the right, and then it will be pointed straight toward you. And if it's flying to the left, you'll just turn to the left until again it's not moving, and again it'll be flying straight towards you. And if it's not flying either right or left, then it's either facing directly towards you or directly away from you. So you can just turn to the right, and if it goes to the right, you'll know it was facing away, and then you can keep turning to the right until it stops going right or left, and then it's coming back at you. And if you turn it right and it goes to the left, you'll know that it's already coming back toward you, and you can just turn it the other way to get it back on course. And that's just an easy way to visually regain orientation of the drone if for some reason, let's say your phone dies and you can't use all the nice automated smart features in the app. And this actually brings up reversed controls. When you're flying the drone towards you and visually looking at it, left and right are reversed. So if you're flying toward yourself visually looking at the drone and you push the stick to the right, the drone will appear to move to the left. And if you push the stick to the left, the drone will appear to move to the right. And this can actually cause a lot of crashes because you push your stick one way, think the drone's gonna go that way, and it actually goes the opposite direction. So just keep this in mind. When you're flying toward you, either just look at the screen and fly it from the screen, or if you're visually looking at the drone, keep in mind that the controls are reversed. Eventually, the reversed controls when you're flying the drone towards you just get programmed into your brain and you don't even have to think about it. When I'm flying a drone towards me, my brain just automatically mirrors the controls and it's totally fine. But if you want to see how this works, just take your drone out to an open field, fly it towards yourself, and then turn or fly to the right or the left, and pretty soon you'll get used to how it works and won't have to worry about it. Mistake number 5 is crashing into power lines or wires or cables. This causes so many crashes because wires are very hard to see in the video feed on your drone, and obstacle avoidance usually can't see them, and they're around quite a bit. I've nearly run into power lines or wires several times, I have multiple friends who have destroyed their drones running them into power lines. It's a good idea to take a look around an area visually before you fly your drone and keep a sharp eye out for any kind of power lines, any kind of, let's say, cables holding up a tower, any kind of other obstacles, so there aren't any unpleasant surprises. And if you're just starting out flying a drone, maybe just don't fly around power lines. It will probably save you from a few crashes. And drone mistake number 7 is keeping flying when your battery level gets too low or flying with half discharged batteries. When you're flying your drone and get a battery level is low warning and the drone says it's time to fly home, it can be super tempting to try to get in a few more shots before you land. And technically you can fly for a bit longer after the auto return to home pops up. I do that many times. But if you're a beginner, I strongly recommend that you don't try to do that, because at some point the battery will get so low that it will just start to auto land straight down wherever it is. And the only way to keep it from auto landing is by pushing all the way up on the throttle, which will keep it in the air, but even then at some point it will just land anyway because it's run out of battery power into whatever is underneath it. And especially if the drone is quite a ways away from you, it can actually run out of battery power before you can fly all the way back. I actually had this happen to me once. I was in Lake Bled, Slovenia. I was filming some shots with my Mini 3 Pro, so a couple generations older than this, but same idea. I had it all the way out across the lake. I wanted to get a few more shots, so I ignored the low battery, returned home, thought I was fine, tried to get a few more shots, and then when I tried to come back, I didn't have enough juice in the battery to make it all the way back across the lake, and so it just started auto landing. And I knew I couldn't get all the way back to my side of the lake, so instead of just letting it drop in the lake, I brought it down and kind of crash landed in the grass halfway around the lake, and then had to go run over and pull it out of the grass. Thankfully, I was able to save the drone in this situation, but it could have turned out a lot worse. So definitely don't push your luck with low battery. And you can also run into issues having enough battery to make it back if you're flying in high winds, because you might fly with the wind a long distance away and then be fighting the wind to come back, which takes a lot more battery power. So don't get anywhere close to pushing the limits of battery life when you're flying in high winds. Now, it's also not ideal to fly with a partially empty battery. Sometimes it can be just fine to fly with a battery that's partially discharged. Like for example, if you've just flown part of the battery and then want to take the drone up for a second flight with the same battery. That can be just fine, and this has all gotten to be less of an issue with the Mini 5 Pro than with some older drones. But flying with partially discharged batteries can get you in some real trouble. The main time you'll run into issues is if your batteries have auto discharged. After a few days, Mini 5 Pro batteries will automatically drain part of the power out of them, because it's not good for lithium batteries to stay fully charged for a long time. So if your batteries have auto discharged, or you've half flown a battery and then left it sit for a few days, when you go to fly it again, it can actually limit the power output of the drone because the battery just can't put out enough voltage to the motors. And that can make it so that you can't climb with the drone as fast as you're expecting, and it can sometimes make it so that you'll actually run into an obstacle that you thought you could clear and get up and over. And in some extreme cases, it can even cause the drone to do a forced landing if the voltage drops too low. I've had that happen. It's not good, and theoretically it could cause you to crash. So in general, try not to fly with batteries that have been sitting with a partial charge for a while, or if you do need to, just keep in mind that they may not be able to put out full power. Mistake number 8 is not realizing that you have obstacle avoidance turned off or that you're in sport mode. And this is something that's caused me to crash more than once.
Slowly, and make sure that your movements stay nice. What? I just crashed. Like, I had obstacle avoidance turned on. Hold on a second. Oh no, obstacle avoidance was turned off. Don't trust obstacle avoidance when you have it turned off.
And nearly caused me to crash quite a few more times. And there's a couple different ways this can happen. First of all, in sport mode, if you haven't figured this out yet, there's no obstacle avoidance. And it's easy to forget that you flipped the drone into sport mode and be flying around thinking the obstacle avoidance is protecting you when it actually isn't. And the second way it can happen, which might be even more dangerous, is if you turn off obstacle avoidance in the settings in normal mode, which I sometimes do to let me fly in tighter spaces. If you turn off obstacle avoidance, you need to make sure that you remember to turn it back on. This has definitely caused me some crashes because I thought obstacle avoidance was covering me, but it actually wasn't. This is super easy to do, so if you ever turn obstacle avoidance off, make sure that you don't forget to go into the settings and turn it back on. And mistake number 9 is not knowing the drone's stopping distance. Drones can't just stop on a dime. It takes a certain amount of distance for the drone to brake and stop when you're flying it. And the faster you're flying, the longer it takes for the drone to stop. And this can be really easy to miscalculate when you're just starting out, or even if you have more experience, especially when you're flying the drone back towards you or flying towards something. And that makes it really easy to accidentally crash into yourself or something else because you didn't start slowing down with the drone soon enough. And to get a bit of a feel for this, it's a really good idea to take your drone out into an open field and get a better idea of how far it takes for the drone to brake and stop, so that you don't run into things when you're flying. And mistake number 10 is not understanding how return to home works. Now, there's several important things you need to know about return to home. The first one is that when the drone decides to return to home, whether you just push the return to home button on the remote, or the battery gets low, or you fly out of signal range, it will send up to a certain preset altitude that you can set in the settings and fly back to you. And you need to make sure that that altitude is set higher than any obstacles in the area, otherwise the drone could just smack right into them on its way back to you. I usually keep the return to home altitude set to 400 feet because I live in an area with a lot of tall hills and obstacles, and I don't want to have to always be changing it and worrying about it depending on where I'm flying. You just want to make sure that it's higher than any obstacles in the immediate area. Now, on the Mini 5 Pro, there's something called Smart Return to Home, where the drone will use its sensors and flight data to find the most optimized path to come back to you without necessarily going up to a preset altitude. And from my testing, that actually works quite well, although there's part of me that still is not 100% sure if I trust it. So on the Mini 5 Pro, return to home altitude is somewhat less important if you have return to home set to smart. But the next thing that you need to understand about return to home is very relevant on the Mini 5 Pro, and that is where your return to home point is set to. A common misconception is that the home point automatically updates to where the controller is, but this isn't true by default. The home point is actually set to wherever the drone first gets a GPS lock. So when you fire up your drone, it looks for and connects to a bunch of GPS satellites, and once it's connected to enough satellites to figure out where it is, you'll hear the home point has been updated, and now it has set its home point to that location where it was when it got a GPS lock. And that location is where it will always fly back to when you hit the return to home button, unless you update the home point. And this is great most of the time, but there's a couple things you need to be careful about. First of all, the drone will actually let you take off before it has a GPS lock, and it will just use the vision sensors on the bottom of the drone, which actually works pretty well. But if you fly a ways away from exactly where you took off before it gets a GPS lock, then it will set the home point to wherever it got its first GPS lock. And if this happens to be over trees or over water or over somewhere where you can't get to, then when you hit return to home, the drone will return to that point instead of where you took off from, and you could potentially end up losing your drone. And the second thing that can happen is if you move away from where you took off with your drone, let's say you take off from the back of a vehicle or a boat on the water, and then you move away from where you took off from, the drone will still go back to where you originally took off. And again, this could be really bad if you are a longer distance away, especially if you're, let's say, out over water. It could just go and hover and eventually land in the water. So to fix this, what you can do is you'll want to use actually a new feature on the Mini 5 Pro called Dynamic Home Point. You can just go into the settings, into safety settings, and you can update the home point, and you'll want to click on Dynamic Home Point. And then it will update the home point to the current location of your remote in real time as you move around, so the Mini 5 Pro will always come back to you instead of where it took off from. Now, Dynamic Home Point will only work with the DJI RC2 remote, not with the RC-N3 where you mount your phone, because apparently DJI doesn't trust the compass on your phone. And the third thing you need to know about return to home is the signal lost return to home settings. By default, when the remote loses connection with the drone will automatically fly back to the home point, which is great 99% of the time. But sometimes that can be a problem. And there's one specific situation where this can actually crash your drone. And that is if you're flying under some type of overhead obstacles, for example, flying under tree branches or indoors. In situations like this, if your drone thinks that it's lost connection to the remote and return to home kicks in, the drone will fly straight up and run into whatever is above it. I actually learned this the hard way. I was filming a waterfall under some trees. I was actually standing just a couple feet away from the drone at the time, but for some reason it decided that the remote had disconnected and initiated return to home, and it flew straight up into some trees that were above it and got stuck in the tree. I had to throw sticks at it, knock it out of the tree, try to start the props on the way down, fell down onto a rock, and majorly damaged the drone. So big mistake there, and something you probably don't want to repeat. So to fix this, we can go into the settings, into safety settings, go down to advanced safety settings, and there's 3 options for signal lost. You can set the drone to return to home. You'll want to keep it on this 99% of the time. You can set it to hover. The drone will just hover in place until you reconnect to it. Or you can set it to descend and land. I don't even know exactly why descend and land is an option, because I really don't want the drone to just land into whatever's under it at the time when it disconnects. But for those situations where you're flying under overhead obstacles, it's best to set signal lost to hover instead of return to home. But you'll want to make sure that you set it back to return to home when you're done flying in those situations, because I've forgotten to do this and nearly lost my drone because I flew it just out of range, and because return to home was off, it wouldn't automatically return. Thankfully, I was able to get a little bit closer to the drone and get it to reconnect and fly back, but you definitely want this set to return to home most of the time, and forgetting to set it back to return to home could also make you lose your drone. And bonus mistake number 11 is getting boring drone shots. This is something a lot of beginner drone pilots do. They just kind of fly their drone around aimlessly and have no idea how to get good shots. So to fix that, you can click right here to watch another video where I teach you 10 cinematic drone moves that anyone can do, even if you're a beginner, that will give you professional looking footage. And make sure to watch my free drone filmmaking training. And if you want to go even deeper, I have an entire 12-hour drone filmmaking course where I go into every single step of my workflow for creating professional cinematic drone videos. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you in the next video.